for that particular case. So it could vary based on which ones you do, but this is something you could possibly do in the United States Army. All right, so some of you wanted more information on the previous 2 Minute Tuesday. So I'm gonna kind of go off and just kind of rant, I guess, a little bit about some different experiences, some different things to hopefully give you more information than I could possibly fit in those 2 minutes. So for future reference, if you want a longer video than the 2 Minute Tuesday offers, then make sure to leave those in the comments. It helps also if you have questions as to what it is you want to know about, because then I can address those in the Not So 2 Minute Tuesday videos. So some videos will get a Not 2 Minute Tuesday episode, some won't. So I won't always be doing this. So let's talk a little bit more, I guess, about funeral detail in the United States Army. So this detail will include, 6 people to be pallbearers / flag folding individuals. There's 7 individuals, I believe it is, for the 21 gun salute. You have an NCOIC, and then sometimes you also have a bugle player, which isn't really playing the bugle. It's like this recording that's in there, and they press a button and then pretend to play the bugle, and it plays taps, but it's just a recording. There are some cases where maybe like an honor guard individual maybe is legitimately playing taps on a bugle, but most of the time, with a normal funeral detail, it's just like we're recording. Sometimes they do that, sometimes they just do it where they're playing it over a PA system, but there are cases where you'll have like a fake bugle that just plays a recording of taps, and they utilize that sometimes. Now, the person in charge of the funeral detail can vary based on who it is that the funeral is for. If the funeral is for an enlisted person, then it's a non-commissioned officer that is the person in charge, or the NCOIC. But if that individual that passed away was an officer, then yes, it will be an officer that is the person in charge of that funeral detail. So starting off with like those pallbearers or those flag folding individuals. Now that pallbearer, if you're not familiar with what that is, that basically are individuals that would carry the casket. So there were some funerals that I did where we had to carry the casket, but then there was also some situations where they had their own pallbearers, maybe they were family, or maybe it was a situation where the individual was cremated, so there wasn't a casket. So in the situations where there was a casket, you had to go over to the hearse, and you kind of had to like shimmy the casket over to, everybody grab hold of it, do these little face-up maneuvers to carry the casket over to like the rack where it had to sit on to get lowered down into the grave. So you carried it to there, lowered it there, and then the flag is draped over that casket, and everybody grabs a hold of the flag, and you do some different commands to, in unison, pull the flag tight and pull it up off the casket and make sure that it doesn't touch the casket. Because once it is removed from the casket, it can't touch the casket ever again. That's kind of like the rule, I guess. So along with that usually comes that they typically want people in this detail to be above a certain height to make sure that everybody looks uniform, but also is tall enough to easily be able to do so without having to like hold the flag up high to make sure that it clears the casket. So that's also another kind of criteria they usually have in there. Is usually people around like 5'10", 5'11" and up. But then don't get too extreme, because then you have these crazy variations of soldiers being really tall and normal height and all that kind of stuff. So they usually try to keep the soldiers in the same height. But it will be really any MOS. It's not really locked in to be a specific MOS. It's just based on whatever unit happens to receive that tasking for that time period. But I guess going back to that pallbearer and flag folding individuals, they then are holding the flag and they move to another location, maybe just past the casket, and then go through a little ceremony of folding the flag, where it's basically getting folded into the triangle, getting passed on to the next soldier, and then once it gets to the last soldier, they kind of do their little last minute touches to make sure it's all tucked in and nice and tight triangle, and then pass it off to that OIC or the NCOIC that stuffs a few rounds into them. They're usually like empty cartridges, I believe, into the flag. It's just part of the ceremony. And they pass it off to that NCO. He stuffs those rounds in there and he receives it, and then he also salutes it before receiving it though. From there, that NCO, I see, takes that flag over to whoever it is that's supposed to be receiving the flag. It could be a spouse, it could be a family member of some sort. I believe it's usually the person on the very end is usually designated for receiving the flag, and they usually have that kind of set up prior. That way we don't have to, ahead of time get with the individuals to find out who's receiving the flag. We just are supposed to know that that last chair on the very end at the front is the person that receives that flag. So they hand it over, they have like a little speech that they say. I won't get into the speech, you can probably look it up if you want, but that NCOIC or the OIC has a speech that they're supposed to say. They hand off the flag, and then they kind of do like a salute. By the way, each of those salutes are like a slower version. It's not like the quick snapping salute. It's like a more of a kind of a slower salute. They kind of hold it and then they kind of bring it back down. It's more ceremonial, I guess. And then from there, at some point in the ceremony, there's going to be the 21 gun salute, and that has to be all in unison. Soldiers have to practice this a lot to make sure that it's perfect, to where it's not like clack, 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 all these, random shots going off. It should sound like one loud boom as all 7 of those individuals are firing at the same time. So they practice that. There's commands to go along with it to make sure to do it. There's different maneuvers to do it. They're using blanks. They're using blank rounds. They're not really firing live rounds off into the air that come following some results. They're using blank rounds, so they're going to be firing off these blanks. So then I believe it's after the 21 gun salute that usually they play taps, and they have taps, and that usually is towards the end of the ceremony. So kind of additional information other than just the ceremony itself, you know, there's a lot of practice that goes into it. Like when I did it, we had like a wooden casket you practiced with. Some individuals have an actual casket that they would use to practice with. They would put weight inside of it to kind of, you know, learn how to do these face-up maneuvers with some weight in the casket as if there was an actual individual inside that casket. And then for like the individuals doing the 21 gun salute, a lot of times they'll do dry fires, so they won't have any ammunition. They'll just go through and make sure that they get it, you know, the trigger squeeze down perfectly to be able to be in unison. And then they might have a certain amount of rounds allocated to be able to utilize of blanks to be able to practice with as well. So a lot of times this detail lasts for like a whole month. So it's like a month straight of just nothing but practicing, and then they have a schedule so they know what funerals they're gonna be going to, or sometimes they just kind of, you know, get scheduled on the fly, and then they'll say, hey, we have a funeral tomorrow, so make sure you guys got your stuff ready. But usually in my experience, it'd be like, you know, all morning, you know, doing practicing, and then if we didn't have a funeral that day, usually they'd cut us loose after lunch and be like, hey, make sure your uniform's squared away and your uniform looks good. And then if we had a funeral maybe the next day, you'd probably be doing a lot of practicing, make sure you're good. And then the next day we'd have a specific time we had to meet up to be able to get us to that location on time. These funerals could be pretty much within the state. They could be a little outside of the state. It just kind of depends on other military installations nearby as far as who can pick up these funerals compared to these ones over here in this area. But when I did it, I was in Fort Riley, so pretty much I think all the ones we did were all in Kansas. There might have been somewhere you went to Missouri or whatever, but most of the ones I remember were all inside the state of Kansas. They might have been in the southern area or the northern area, but they were still within that state. But that won't be the case for everybody. Some people will go outside the state and to other locations. Remember with this, we'd usually try to get there, you know, ahead of time to, you know, make sure we don't have any kind of problems with showing up late. So we'd get there enough time to maybe be able to hit up the mall or go get something to eat or whatever, and then have to be at the location that we're supposed to be at, you know, maybe like an hour prior or something like that, so we can get a little bit of last minute practice in or whatever before the actual ceremony itself. During this ceremony, you are in your dress uniform. You have white gloves that you wear, and you have to make sure your uniform looks really great, and you'll go and usually travel in civilian clothes, but then once we get to like the funeral home or wherever the ceremony is going to take place at, then we'll change into the Army service uniform. So kind of a crazy story, I guess I'll share from one of my experiences of doing a funeral detail. This was, keep in mind, early 2000s, before 9/11 even happened. So security wasn't quite as strict as it is now on certain aspects. You weren't quite as paranoid or, you know, kind of, you know, uptight about security as, you know, things are now. But we were in one of the cities in Kansas. I think we stopped off at like a Walmart or something. Well, we have all these M16s with us for the ceremony and everything, and we just left them in the back of this government vehicle. We had a van, and they have government license plates on them, but we left all the M16s in the back of the van. Nobody thought about leaving a guard, which we probably should have. I wasn't the one in charge. I was like a private first class at the time, so I wasn't the person in charge. I think I had a staff sergeant in charge, so that was the individual that should have made the call to probably leave someone with the van, but we didn't. So we all went inside of Walmart, and we came back out of Walmart and found that there was a couple cop cars outside of our van looking around, and we had to go up there and find out what was going on. Well, apparently somebody saw all these M16s in the back of the van, got a little worried, and called the police. So we had to explain to them, no, we're on funeral detail, we're in the United States military, and they're, okay. So it's kind of a crazy situation. In reality, should have left a guard. Somebody should have stayed with those weapons, because there could have been a possibility of someone breaking out that window and stealing all these M16s or whatever. But like I said, you know, this was before 9/11, and security wasn't quite as, you know, crazy as it is now. But in hindsight, we should have had a guard with that van. But that's going to end this little not so 2-minute Tuesday video on funeral detail. And like I said, in the future videos, make sure if you have a 2-minute Tuesday video you would like a little bit more of a kind of, you know, it's kind of like a relaxed version of the video, not necessarily being a end-all be-all explanation of the topic, but a little more casual and a little bit more information than when I could have provided in 2-minute Tuesday. But if you want that for a future one, make sure to, you know, leave in the comments of that video saying, hey, I'd like a little bit more, and if you can maybe leave some kind of question that's related to what it is you want to know more about, that can really help me kind of cater these to that. But all right, if you enjoyed the video, make sure you hit that thumbs up, check some links down in the description, also some recommended videos over there. Thank you so much for watching. See you guys next time. See ya.